A week later, we find ourselves today, the same Sunday that Thomas found himself in. The very same day we find ourselves today was the same day that Thomas had his amazing transformation with God. Thomas is in the room with all his doubts, with all his demands, holding on to this statement of, I will not believe. See, in the moments where we know that Jesus comes into this room again, where he has this encounter with Thomas, what changes in Thomas? What changes in Thomas's heart that only Jesus can do? What takes him from, like we said, this up and down man of faith to incredible transformation? What happens in him? How is he healed and restored? And church, you're probably wondering, how can I, in whatever doubt that I have right now, in whatever place that I need healing and restoration, how can I experience that same transformation just like Thomas did? Well, the first thing that Thomas did is that he encountered the wounds. Everyone say the wounds. He encountered the wounds. Thomas wasn't even in church the week before. I mean, come on, man. Easter Sunday. It's like it's the biggest day on the church calendar. He wasn't even in church. But we'll give him a bit of grace. It was the first one. He probably didn't know. Didn't put it in his Google Calendar or whatever. He'll be there next year. But he wasn't even in church. Maybe he was scared. Maybe he was full of anxiety, full of betrayal because Jesus had died. Maybe it was a bit of everything. But we see on this second Sunday, even in the midst of his doubt, he was desperate for Jesus to do something in his life. Deep down, Thomas was desperate to have an encounter with God. How do we know that? How do we know that he was desperate? Well, because he was in the room. Thomas was in the room on that Sunday. The disciples were scared. They locked the doors the second week. They were scared the Jewish leaders were going to kill them. They thought that they were next. But with Thomas, beyond all of that doubt, beyond all of that fear, he was desperate to have an encounter with God. So church, whatever you have going on in your heart today, whatever doubt you may have, whatever fear you may have, whatever numbness that you might have to the presence of God, that one day in the past, you used to be able to feel God's presence and feel him working in your heart, but today you feel absolutely nothing. Don't stop turning up. Don't stop positioning yourself in the room. Don't stop being in the room. In your life, we need to out-position our pain. Your pain is going to tell you maybe just sit out this Sunday. Wake up, it's raining outside like this morning. I can just watch church online, or even better, I could go get a coffee this morning and go run my hands through the roses at the botanical gardens and be in the creation of our God on a Sunday morning. Maybe that's letting your pain position you from not being in church. Maybe that's letting your doubt position you from not being where you can encounter Jesus. You might not have felt that presence of God like you used to before, but your encounter moment is coming. Keep on positioning yourself for encounter. Imagine Thomas never went into the room on that Sunday. Who knows where he would have gone? Who knows what he would have done? But he wouldn't have had this encounter. John 20, verse 25 says, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my fingers where the nails were and put my hand into his side, he says these words, I will not believe. In this encounter that Thomas has with Jesus, imagine how humbling it would have been, because he said that to the disciples. But then Jesus comes back in verse 27 and repeats his own words back to him. Verse 27 says, put your finger here, see my hands, reach out your hand and put it into my side. Jesus knew. He knew the doubt, he knew the fear, and he knew the demands that Thomas had placed on him. He knew. Church, whatever you're going through, God knows. He hears you, he knows you, he loves you, and he wants to make you whole again, just like he did with Thomas. Just like Thomas, Jesus wants you to see his wounds. Just like Thomas, he wants you to see what Jesus had done for us, because he has won it all on the cross. Our debt has been paid through the wounds of Jesus. Isaiah 53, starting from verse 5, says, but he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. And sometimes we can stop that verse there and say amen, but verse 6 is a very honest verse. It says, we all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each one of us has turned our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. We all, just like Thomas, have gone astray. We all have our moments of doubt. We all have our moments in our heart that need healing, that only the wounds of Jesus can heal. The thing about Thomas's demands is that he demands that he needs to physically put his hands in the nail wounds, put his hand in the side, and Jesus invites him to do that. How gracious is that? That Thomas demands to the King of Kings, the creator of the universe, the resurrected Jesus, to do that, and Jesus invites him. Jesus seemingly gives into the demands that Thomas has on his faith. But you know, theologians actually agree that Thomas never actually got to the point of literally, physically putting his fingers and his hands in the wounds. Because when Thomas saw Jesus, that presence, that encounter was enough for him to be restored. Thomas thought he knew what he needed to have faith. But Jesus knows, and Jesus knew that his presence was going to be enough. Jesus knew that his encounter with the wounds was going to be enough. All it took for him was to see Jesus, not to touch him, but just to see him, and it changed everything forever. So with you in this place, you might have made similar demands to Jesus, just like Thomas. I need this to happen, and then I'll believe again. I need this person to come to me and say sorry before I serve on a team again. I need this prayer. Well, that got some reactions out of people, that one. I need this prayer I've been praying answered, God, before I give you my whole heart. 2 Corinthians 12:9 says, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so Christ's power may rest on me. The King of Kings came down to Thomas's level. What amazing grace that is. But yet Jesus didn't give him what Thomas thought that he needed. Instead, he gave him the grace that restored all. Church, keep on positioning yourself in the wounds. And when you have an encounter with the wounds, the presence of Jesus will be enough to make you whole, to restore you, to heal your lack of faith, to heal your doubt, to heal your unforgiveness, whatever it is. Whatever demands you have put on Jesus, he is so gracious to come down to our level, but to take us to a new place.